14 minutes. This isn't the flight time of a ballistic missile. It's not a launch window. It is the exact amount of time needed to render America's $130 billion fleet of nuclear submarines completely blind. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why Pentagon strategists and Rand Corporation analysts consider this vulnerability the most serious threat to global deterrence since the Cold War. What Russia and China have developed isn't a torpedo. It's not a depth charge. It is a three-layered denial architecture that transforms the world's most expensive and sophisticated fleet of nuclear submarines into $6 billion vessels without GPS, without command orders, and with a navigation system drifting progressively further from reality with every passing hour. They aren't trying to sink American submarines. They're trying to blind them. And that distinction changes absolutely everything. Because there is a fundamental difference between destroying a deterrent and making it operationally uncertain. A destroyed deterrent is a visible defeat in act of war that triggers immediate global consequences. A deterrent made uncertain is something else. It's a silent erosion of credibility that changes the risk calculus of rational adversaries without firing a single shot. This isn't a simulation. It isn't an academic exercise. It is the most important geopolitical story you will hear this week, and it begins with the question Pentagon planners have been asking in silence for months, and which in recent months has become truly urgent. What happens to American nuclear deterrence when the most reliable leg of the triad can be blinded before any missile is ever fired? To understand what's at stake in those 14 minutes, you first need to understand what's at stake in those $130 billion. And for that, you need to forget about aircraft carriers for a moment. Most people focus on the wrong metric when trying to grasp the true scale of American military power. They only look at aircraft carriers. It's understandable. Carriers are iconic. They're photographed. They're symbols of power projection. They're what appear on every news broadcast when the United States wants to demonstrate a naval presence. The USS Gerald R. Ford cost $13 billion. And is the most expensive warship ever built. It attracts attention, analysis, and media coverage. But aircraft carriers don't carry strategic nuclear weapons. Submarines do. The Virginia class is the most expensive ongoing naval procurement program in the United States. You're looking at over $130 billion in total contract value, and that's before the fleet expansions planned for the end of this decade. 22 boats in active service as of 2024. With more under construction, each costing between $3 and $6 billion depending on the variant and the contract. Each operating in silence, at depth, in positions that the Pentagon itself does not publicly announce. Why does this matter beyond the numbers? Because the United States operates with what strategists call a nuclear triad, 3 independent pillars, each capable of launching a second strike response. The first pillar consists of Air Force strategic bombers. The second is intercontinental ballistic missiles ICBMs, located in silos in the American Midwest. And the third is submarines. Of the three, only submarines are considered virtually invulnerable to a first strike. A bomber can be destroyed on the runway before it ever takes off. A silo can be identified by reconnaissance satellites and eliminated by an enemy ICBM in a precisely coordinated decapitation strike. But a submarine operating in silence, at depths that make its location an operational unknown to any adversary that asset, is what military planners call a guaranteed second strike. This is precisely why no rational adversary would pull the nuclear trigger against the United States. The absolute certainty that even after a devastating first strike, American submarines will survive in the depths and retaliate. This guaranteed response is what makes a first strike a strategic irrationality. This concept has a technical name, deterrence credibility. And it is exactly this credibility, not the submarines themselves, but the certainty that they can and will respond. That those 14 minutes threaten, not with torpedoes, not with explosives, but with invisible electromagnetic signals operating at frequencies most people have never considered relevant to nuclear security. To understand how this blindness is induced, we first need to examine what makes submarines operational in deep waters and how their very architecture hides a lethal vulnerability. To understand how a nuclear submarine can be blinded, you need to understand how it sees, how it knows where it is. how it receives orders, how it maintains its connection to the world above the surface. In December 2023, a commercial supply ship sailing through the Baltic Sea reported something that didn't make sense. Its GPS receiver calibrated, verified, with no history of failure, indicated a steady position more than 30 kilometers from where coastal radar located it. The captain tried to recalibrate. The receiver kept reporting the same false position with the same apparent precision. There was no indication of error. The system was simply lying. This incident, documented by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, wasn't an anomaly. It was a demonstration of what happens when navigation architecture is attacked from within. And for a nuclear submarine, this architecture has two critical components, both with structural vulnerabilities that adversaries have spent decades mapping. The first is the SINS ship's inertial navigation system. SINS is the submarine's motion memory. Equipped with ultra-high precision gyroscopes and accelerometers, it tracks every variation in speed, every turn, every change in depth, and mathematically integrates this data to calculate where the submarine is at any given moment. No GPS, no external reference, just physics applied through high-precision sensors. It's a brilliant solution for an environment where external references are unavailable. But it has an unavoidable problem. SINS drifts. This isn't a manufacturing defect, it's physics. Every measurement system has an intrinsic margin of error. In inertial sensors, these tiny errors, imperceptible in any individual reading, accumulate over time. Within hours, the errors are negligible. But over days of a deep mission, the calculated position starts to diverge from the actual position by tens or even hundreds of meters. Within weeks, the divergence can become tactically and operationally significant. The solution for SINS drift is elegant. Periodically, the submarine obtains an external positional anchor, a GPS fix. It rises to communication depth or launches a buoy and receives a precise position update via the global positioning system. The drift is zeroed out. SINS restarts with a reliable reference. But what happens when you poison that reference? The second component is even more critical for the chain of command. Communication with a deep-diving submarine requires frequencies that can penetrate the water column. The only frequencies with this capability are VLF very low frequency, between 3 and 30 kHz, and ELF extremely low frequency, below 3 kHz. These are frequencies with kilometer-long wavelengths. They are the only link between U.S. Strategic Command and a submarine on an active mission. The United States operates a network of terrestrial VLF transmitters to maintain this channel. These are industrial-scale installations antennas, covering dozens of square kilometers, transmitters consuming megawatts of power, structures built decades ago. They transmit at extremely low speeds, dozens of characters per minute, but they are irreplaceable. Cut this link, and the submarine is left without orders. Cut the GPS, and the submarine is left without a reliable position. These two pillars of the submarine inertial navigation and very low-frequency communication are the gateways to operational collapse. And this is where the adversary's tactics reveal themselves. This is the part of the video that changes how you think about modern warfare. What Russia and China have developed isn't just a new class of missiles. It's a three-layered structured denial architecture that, when operating simultaneously, creates a state of deep blindness that no single countermeasure can resolve. The first layer is GPS spoofing. Spoofing isn't jamming, and that distinction is absolutely fundamental. Jamming blocks the GPS signal. It's brutal, effective, and detectable. A receiver that gets no signal knows it's being blocked. The operator knows something is wrong. Spoofing is radically different. Instead of blocking the real signal, you inject a false signal stronger than the legitimate satellite signal that tells the GPS receiver exactly where it is, but incorrectly. The receiver displays no error. It doesn't know it's been deceived. It updates its position with false data and continues to operate normally. For a submarine using GPS to zero out SINS drift, this isn't just an accuracy problem, it's reference poisoning. Every GPS fix performed during active spoofing anchors the SINS to a wrong position, and for every hour that follows, the error grows from that false anchor. The second layer is ASAT anti-satellite attacks. If spoofing poisons GPS signals, ASAT attacks remove the satellites themselves. In November 2021, Russia activated the Noodle system, its direct-ascent ASAT interceptor, and destroyed the Cosmos 1408 satellite in operational orbit. The resulting debris field forced the International Space Station to perform emergency evasive maneuvers. The chosen altitude was a doctrinal signal, low to medium orbit, operationally relevant to the American GPS constellation. The third layer is VLF jamming. The Russian Murmansk BN system, the largest broad-spectrum electronic warfare platform currently deployed by any military force in the world, saturates VLF frequencies across distances of up to 5,000 kilometers, confirmed by open-source analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This range, originating from Russian territory, covers most of the North Atlantic and primary NATO submarine patrol routes. You can identify these facilities through commercial satellite imagery. You can track activation patterns in published Russian military exercises. The threat is already physically built and fully operational. Now, put all three layers together. GPS spoofing that poisons the position reference. ASAT that removes backup satellites. VLF jamming that cuts the link with strategic command. These three overlapping vectors cause no physical damage. Instead, when activated simultaneously, they convert the Navy's most lethal deterrence platform into an isolated giant, unable to confirm its coordinates, impossible to receive critical orders, and relying on gyroscopes that lose precision with every passing minute. And this is where the story stops being about electromagnetic signals and starts being about $130 billion that might not be buying what American taxpayers think they're buying. The result of this convergence materializes in 14 minutes. Let's do the math. This math isn't rhetoric. It's operational mathematics with real strategic consequences. And it's what makes those 14 minutes concrete. A Virginia-class submarine operating on a deep-sea mission depends on SINS as its primary navigation source between GPS fixes. SINS accumulates drift error, an engineering constant, not a variable. The magnitude of the error depends on the quality of the inertial sensors, the frequency of maneuvers, and the oceanographic conditions affecting the sensors. For open ocean route navigation, error margins of hundreds of meters are acceptable. For a firing solution, the precise calculation of where the submarine is in relation to the target, precision requirements are in the range of tens of meters. The difference between these two error margins is the difference between a submarine that navigates and a submarine that can be activated as a credible deterrent. Now consider the failure sequence within an active denial window. In the first few minutes, GPS spoofing is activated. The submarine believes it is receiving a valid position update. Its SINS has just been anchored to a false position, but all systems report normality. No alarms. No indicators of compromise. In the following minutes, VLF jamming begins. The communications window with Strategic Command closes. The submarine stops receiving order confirmations. It stops receiving the authentication codes that confirm any incoming launch message is legitimate and not a forged transmission by the adversary. In the final minutes, the combination of a compromised position, cut communications, and progressive degradation of the inertial reference produces what special operations analysts call significant tactical operational uncertainty. The commander has no way to confirm where they are, no way to receive verified orders, no way to distinguish between a legitimate launch order and a fabricated message. You might ask, can't the commander just surface and re-establish the signal? They can. But surfacing during an active denial window compromises the submarine's most valuable asset, stealth. A submarine rising to periscope depth is detectable by radar, by passive surface sonar, by reconnaissance satellites. In an environment where the adversary is actively deploying electronic warfare and space monitoring, surfacing might be exactly what the enemy was baiting them to do. Alternative systems also have real structural limitations. Celestial navigation requires periscope depth and visibility above the surface. Impractical in cloudy weather. Impossible during a deep dive. Acoustic positioning relies on beacons that can be compromised. None of these alternatives replicate the speed and precision of GPS under normal operating conditions. The logic that leads to 14 minutes is this. It's not the time it takes to destroy a submarine. It's the time it takes to create enough operational uncertainty so that the second strike response, the guarantee that makes deterrence credible, becomes a question instead of a certainty. In nuclear deterrence theory, a question is a strategic defeat. It remains to be seen whether all this is just a theoretical model or a proven risk. There is a massive gulf between capability designed in a lab and documented operational precedent, and Russia has already crossed that line explicitly and repeatedly. In 2017, ships in the Baltic Sea began reporting clearly unusual GPS anomalies, false positions being reported by receivers aboard civilian and military vessels, with discrepancies reaching dozens of kilometers from their actual position. The Center for Strategic and International Studies documented these incidents. The publication, The War Zone, published technical analyses with records of affected vessels. It wasn't a hardware failure, it was active and deliberate interference. The incidents were repeated in the Black Sea. In the Syrian theater, where Russia has operated extensively since 2015, aircraft and ground forces reported GPS degradation consistent with active spoofing. The Kibini system, the electronic warfare suite carried by Russian aircraft, including Su-34 and Su-35 variants, demonstrated the ability to compromise navigation signals in real-world operational conditions, not in a controlled test. In combat operations, the Murmansk BN, deployed at least 4 locations within Russian territory, goes beyond theater-level spoofing. With a documented range of 5,000 kilometers and VLF frequency saturation capability, it operates on the communication layer, not just the navigation layer. CSIS classifies it as the most capable broad-spectrum electronic warfare platform currently deployed by any global power. A 5,000-kilometer range from Russian territory covers most of the North Atlantic. It covers the primary patrol routes of the NATO submarine fleet. It covers the sectors where Virginia-class submarines operate in their strategic deterrence role. And then, November 2021. Russia activated the Nudal system and destroyed Cosmos 1408, a decommissioned Soviet satellite orbiting at an altitude of approximately 480 kilometers. The resulting debris field, with more than 1,500 trackable fragments according to U.S. Space Command, forced the International Space Station to perform emergency evasion maneuvers. The U.S. State Department condemned the test as irresponsible. Russia did not respond. What the test demonstrated was precise doctrinal signaling. The chosen altitude range is relevant to the American GPS constellation. Analysts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies classified the test as the first documented demonstration of a Russian ASAT system tested at an operationally significant altitude for strategic navigation degradation, converting an academic hypothesis into a demonstrated orbital capability. The question isn't whether Russia has this capability. That is established. The question is who else is coordinated to activate the denial architecture simultaneously. And the answer to that question points directly to Beijing. This is where Beijing enters the calculation. And here, the scale of the problem multiplies. China doesn't need to fire a single shot at an American submarine. It only needs to remove the satellites those submarines depend on. The logic is simple. This capability has been under development for nearly 20 years. In January 2007, China conducted its first successful ASAT test since the American experiments of the 1980s. The system used was the SC-19, a direct-ascent kinetic interceptor. The target was the Fengyun 1C weather satellite, orbiting at an altitude of approximately 850 kilometers. The impact generated one of the largest single-collision debris fields ever recorded in low Earth orbit, over 3,000 trackable fragments by the U.S. Space Surveillance Network, with tens of thousands more estimated smaller fragments. The international community responded with alarm. China noted the reaction and kept developing. The SC-19 was the starting point. What came after is what converts this capability into doctrinal architecture. The Shijian satellite series, developed over the last decade by entities linked to the Chinese military space program, represents what American intelligence analysts describe as a co-orbital capability. The distinction from a direct ascent system is fundamental. A direct ascent system launches an interceptor from the ground and directs it to destroy an orbital target. It is detectable. It is attributable. It is a clear act. A co-orbital system places a platform in an orbit close to the target. This platform can maneuver for weeks or months, gradually approaching, and then interfere with or destroy the target satellite without a ground missile launch detectable by early warning systems. Attribution is more complex. The timing is controlled by the aggressor. According to open-source analyses published by the Secure World Foundation and the Aerospace Security Project, Shijian series satellites have demonstrated approach maneuvers toward other objects in orbit that are operationally consistent with the development of co-orbital capability. What is the practical impact of this orbital tactic on American navigation? The most operationally significant American GPS satellites, Block UEF and Block 3, orbit at a medium altitude of approximately 20,000 kilometers. Chinese Shijian series co-orbital systems have the potential to operate in the altitude range where these satellites reside, the layer that the direct ascent SC-19 does not cover as efficiently. This is exactly the gap that China closes in the joint architecture. Now add the doctrinal dimension, because it is what transforms two parallel programs into a coordinated pincer. China and Russia have conducted joint military exercises, which, since 2018, include explicit coordination components in electronic warfare and space domain operations. Published Chinese military doctrine documents, including versions analyzed by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, describe electromagnetic spectrum dominance operations as a precondition for any successful confrontation with high-tech American forces. The logic behind this complementarity is precise. Russia provides intercontinental range VLF jamming and theater GPS spoofing. China offers the capability to neutralize the GPS constellation itself at medium orbital altitude. Together, these two capabilities cover the entirety of American submarine information and navigation architecture. These aren't two powers acting with disconnected programs. It's a joint denial task force, converging on the information networks that sustain the strategic survivability of the U.S. Navy. And this brings us back to the premise with which this video began. It's not a question about technology. It's not a question about defense budgets. It's a question about what has sustained peace between nuclear powers since 1945. Nuclear deterrence theory has an absolutely fundamental requirement. The adversary must be certain that a first strike does not eliminate the retaliatory capability. The certainty that you will suffer a devastating second strike, even after launching a perfect surprise attack, is what makes a first strike a strategic irrationality. This certainty is the framework that sustains nuclear peace. Remove that certainty, and you change the calculus. You don't need to sink the submarines. You only need to create enough doubt in the adversary's planning models in the war rooms of the general staffs about the reliability of the second strike response, so that a rational adversary begins modeling scenarios where a preemptive first strike has a non-negligible probability of success. The question you need to ask now isn't whether America can destroy the Russian or Chinese naval fleet in a conventional conflict. Clearly, it can. The question is whether the nuclear deterrent component, the existential insurance against escalation that has been the foundation of the international order since the end of World War II, remains operationally credible when the adversary has a documented and operationally tested architecture to blind it within 14 minutes. An uncertain deterrent is not a deterrent. It's a posture, and posture can be tested. The financial dimension of this is concrete and immediate. The United States invested $130 billion in the Virginia-class fleet based on a premise of operational invulnerability. That premise is being eroded in real time not by any physical destruction capability, but by an adversarial information architecture that can be deployed without a declared act of war. The budgetary consequences are direct. The U.S. Navy's Submarine Strategic Communication Program, the VLF infrastructure, is a system built in decades past. Modernizing it to withstand the range and power of the Murmansk BN, according to estimates consulted by the Congressional Research Service, requires investments of $10 to $15 billion in the communication component alone. This does not solve the navigation vulnerability. The development of alternative navigation for operations in GPS-denied environments, including high-precision gravimetry navigation and quantum inertial positioning, is in the early stages of research and development. The maturation timeline for fleet-scale operational deployment, a decade at minimum. Short-term solution available now, non-existent. The AUKUS program, the nuclear submarine agreement with Australia and the United Kingdom, introduces an additional layer of strategic complexity that you need to understand. If American submarines have documented structural vulnerabilities in navigation and communication, the Australian and British submarines that adopt the same operational architecture will inherit the same flaws. Allies observing this situation have already begun to recalculate their dependence on the American deterrence architecture, forcing planners in Japan, South Korea, and NATO to revise their defenses. The response to this vulnerability depends on which adversary moves first, and the indicators you will observe in the coming months answer exactly that question. You now have the complete architecture, the mechanism, the history, the arithmetic. What's missing is knowing what to monitor, because this story isn't static, it's in motion. First, the frequency and altitude of ASAT tests. Every Russian or Chinese interception in the 20 to 25,000 kilometer orbital range, the primary stronghold of GPS satellites, is more than just brute force. It's a target aimed directly at the United States navigation dependency. Second, documented incidents of GPS spoofing in submarine operational zones. The North Atlantic, the South China Sea, and the Arctic. These are the primary patrol areas for the Virginia-class fleet. Any documented GPS anomaly in these regions that cannot be explained by equipment failure deserves immediate analytical attention. Third, American budgetary allocations for VLF infrastructure and alternative submarine communication. If Congress begins approving emergency funding for the modernization of VLF transmitters, or to accelerate navigation programs in denied environments, it confirms that the vulnerability assessment is being taken seriously at a public policy level, not just in classified studies. Fourth, posture adjustments of the submarine fleet. Changes in patrol patterns, operational depths, or communication frequency detectable via Congressional Research Service reports or statements from U.S. Strategic Command signal that the response architecture is being adjusted in the field. Fifth, technical reviews of the AUKUS program. Any modification to the terms of submarine technology transfer that implies changes to the communication or navigation architecture signals formal recognition of the vulnerability at the alliance level, not just at the American bilateral level. The question remains open. When a deterrent can be blinded without being destroyed, what exactly is being deterred? The answer to this question will define the next phase of competition between great powers. Not on battlefields, not in conventional news, in radio frequencies, in satellite constellations, and in quantum navigation labs whose results you will start to see reflected in these 5 indicators over the coming months. This story is far from over. Stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and watch the video on your screen right now, because the next layer of this architecture, the American response to this vulnerability, is already waiting for you.